Monotype.
Welcome to Creative Characters from Monotype, a show where we meet the people working at the intersection of type and everyday life. I'm Carl, and I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Cadley Goslin. Cadley, how are you today?
Doing well.
I heard it was hot in Denver this weekend.
Yes, it was. It's finally cooled down, but yeah, it was a big pool and patio weekend. It was like nearly 100 degrees, so it's spicy.
And you were telling me on our janky first take at this intro that it's peach season in Colorado, which is a good time.
Yeah, peach season is a big deal here. So I've made it out to an orchard and got some Desiree peaches, which I've been slowly eating over the past few days.
Nice.
I've been doing some patio gardening. So yeah, everything's really popping off right now.
Nice. Yeah, we have a big farm down the street from my house that right now is blueberries, strawberries. It's about to be peaches. And it's not the most inappropriate lead in to this week's episode, which is all about sustainability.
Yeah, so this week's guest is pretty passionate about designing for change. We have Nathan Lance. He's the creative director at Leap, which is a B Corp certified design agency. They're based in the UK. And yeah, Nathan's here to talk all about eco-friendly design, sustainability, and brand transparency. We also have our first time Monotype guest, Emilios Stefanos from the Type Studio.
Yeah, Emilios was excited to host this one and did a really great job. So Emilios, come back soon. And what I really like about this conversation is, yes, Nathan and his agency, they do, branding for sustainable companies, but there's really a bigger issue around authenticity in that space where it's not enough to just brand yourself with sustainable looking colors or with that kind of look and feel, but especially nowadays, customers expect you to really walk the walk and live those values. So a lot of what they discuss is, that full scale of authentic commitment to sustainable best practices and what that looks like for brands and how brands can sort of gradually get to a place where they are really executing on that level, especially if they haven't done it before. So I really like that 360-degree view that Nathan and his agency bring to this topic, because it's not enough these days to just make token gestures towards sustainability. It's something that you have to live and breathe every day, but tell that story to your customers in a way that doesn't feel forced or self-serving, but is also true to your identity. So really great conversation for designers and creative directors and people working at agencies or brands where environmental best practices are important. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Emilios and Nathan. And I hope everyone enjoys this episode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Creative Characters. I'm Emilios Stefanos, Creative Type Director at the Monotype Studio. I'm based in London, and I'm really excited to be joined by Nathan today, Creative Director for Leap. And hey Nathan, thank you for joining us. I'm really excited for this one.
Hey Emilio, thanks for having me. I'm the creative director at Leap. So we're a design studio down in Cornwall in England. And we have been redefining the design process to incorporate people, planet, and profit. I started off as Leap's first intern almost 11 years ago. So I had to be quite tenacious with them. And I think I ended up giving them about 4 phone calls and demanding they let me in to have an internship. And from there, I worked my way up the ranks to creative director. And just super excited to be here talking on the podcast with you today.
So let's talk about the agency, Nathan. Let's talk about Leap, when Leap was founded and why.
So Leap was founded in 2004, so by Matthew Hocking, the legend, the man of mystery himself. So he started off his career at the Eden Project, was creative director there. And then, which is kind of, how would you say it? Kind of like the most creative greenhouse in the world. I think I'm underselling it, but it's just this kind of amazing venue place where they kind of grow all these kind of cool plants. So his sustainable journey, I guess, started there. And then what he did is from that moved on to found Leap. So since 2004, we've just kind of been delivering what we call our kind of mission statement, which is design, but keeping people, planet, and profit in mind, which is probably slightly different to most of the agencies out there, especially back in 2004.
So Leap's main objective is sustainability. And you've been, as you said, started as an intern, now you're a creative director. And I'm wondering about the rest of the team. Do you all share similar work ethics? Do you all share the same visions? Is sustainability something that one should answer about in their interview before joining Leap, for example?
I mean, it's a great bonus if someone comes to us and they're really kind of sustainability at the forefront of why they do things and how they do things. But it's definitely not a necessity. I when I kind of joined Leap, I didn't really understand how sustainability and design were related. As far as I was concerned, like I liked making things that looked cool. And that kind of was the limit. It was kind of band posters and skateboards were my aspirations. And maybe at the same time, there was some sort of hating on the Tories and wanting to make some sort of artwork that had some maybe political agenda. But nowhere in my mind did I kind of think about recycled paper and how design can have this like huge impact on the world. And kind of joining Leap, Matt and the team kind of like really showed me the potential power that designers have and how we can go out and change the world, essentially. Whenever we talk about design having that power, there's always a little part of me that cringes a little bit to kind of say that, like, when you go out, you can move these logos and design with these pixels, and it has the power to kind of win hearts and minds and change the very fabric of how we operate as society. But I do really believe that there is so much power in what skills we have and what we can do.
So how do you change the world? Because you mentioned this, like it comes as part of the job description, I would assume. So how do you usually approach, let's say, new projects? What is the process? Is there a checklist, like, for example, you will go through? Or what do you want to understand also from the client point of view when you start a new project?
I think we always want to work with clients that are honest and transparent. I think for us, that's at the very core of what we do and what we set out to achieve. So I think you could probably divide clients into two kind of categories. So there's those clients that already have a business that intrinsically has some kind of sustainability or change making in them. A company that grows mangroves or helps some sort of conservation, like there's kind of an inherent goodness in that. And I think with those companies, as long as the people get on, you don't have to worry too much about the kind of ethics matching up. And then I think there's the other type of company which doesn't necessarily have that intrinsic goodness to them, but they really want to start. And for me, that's where the real potential is. Like it's really great. And I do love working with companies that are actively trying to make the world a better place. But I think meeting those companies that are kind of like, maybe we don't do things the right way at the moment, or maybe we could try and find a way to do things better. That's where you can make the real change. But yeah, in terms of when we meet companies and the kind of checklists we go through when we talk to them, that honesty and transparency. So sitting down with them and saying, do you truly want to do something to avoid greenwashing, or are they just trying to make it look public facing in a way, like, oh, we're doing this little recycling campaign, but we're only doing it just to buy us the good PR and not truly having that as a goal and aspiration for the company.
And I think that let's well into, you said about the clients that approach you, that they might have this in mind already, but I'm also thinking about clients that they might have a lot of assumptions, like regarding a subject or a process, or they are not, for example, informed about the latest solutions or technologies when it comes to sustainability. Because sometimes they might hear sustainability and think, for example, it might be expensive or something like this. So do you have any limitations regarding this, or do people come in and they have any preconceptions about the subject that, you're able to help them to go through and provide solutions that they might even think that it was possible?
Yeah, I think probably most clients come to us and think that sustainability comes with that extra price tag on it, that they're going to be charged 20% more just to make it sustainable. And I think what we're really trying to do is change that thinking completely, that sustainability isn't this bolt-on feature to your rebrand, that it's not like you go down the design process and alongside mocking up business cards, there's add sustainability. They're the first initial conversations when we talk to a brand in terms of, okay, you want to be sustainable. What do you do already? Why do you want to change that? Is it from the leader saying that they want to do it, or is this come from the workers, the kind of bottom up sustainability push? And I think those conversations are really interesting because I think founders do have a little bit of, I guess, fear sometimes when they just don't know, or they're paralyzed in the sense of they don't quite know how they can put sustainability or designing for good within their business. Maybe they're a company that for 100 years have just made, frisbees, for example, and for them to kind of turn around and be like, how can we help the planet when we just make frisbees? And I think it's part of our job as designers and creatives to help guide them through that journey and really help them understand that if it's not directly involved in the business, we can look at their supply chains. We can talk about how they have internal policies. So it doesn't have to be, we're going to take everything that you do and make it 100% recyclable. I think sustainability is so much broader and wider than that. And having those conversations and demystifying what sustainability means for a business is super important at the start.
This leads very nice to what I had in mind to question next, which is, for example, we have sustainable branding, but we also have running businesses in a sustainable way. So these two things might be in parallel. They might, be one and the same, but they might be quite also like distinctive, for example. So do you find a lot of times that there might be an idea in terms of let's do a rebrand and keep it sustainable while the rest of the company is not running in a sustainable way? Or do you find that this comes, as you said, like together? This goes in one direction, hand to hand. What do you think? It's a good description for this.
So you're kind of talking about whether you can do a kind of sustainable project within a brand, but not necessarily have the brand all the way through be sustainable.
Yeah, and it could be, for example, that a brand goes through a rebrand and they think with sustainability for the rebrand, they touch on a few things there, but the brand itself might not be running in a sustainable way, either in terms of manufacture or production or if you feel there is a distinction between brands trying to rebrand in a sustainable way and appear sustainable versus brands that are running sustainable.
Yeah, there's definitely a big difference. And I think there's one way of doing it right and there's another way of doing it wrong. I think wherever you start with sustainability, it's a continuation, kind of a work in progress. There's nothing necessarily wrong with a brand starting off with a sustainable project that maybe hasn't filtered through to the entirety of that company yet. But I think what's really important is for that company to show the intent moving forward that this is a process. We are getting better and we're doing a little bit better every day. What we shouldn't be trying to make companies do is look at this roadmap of sustainability and not want to start on it because they feel like they have to change everything immediately. Although that would be great and that would be amazing, I just don't think it's realistic. I think what we have to do is work with these companies. And even if it's baby steps, I think a baby step in the right direction is still the right direction ultimately. I don't think that we should be chastising brands doing it wrong because they maybe don't have the facilities yet. I think there is maybe a caveat in that, saying that obviously with greenwashing and purpose washing, there is a lot of companies that have no intent of helping the planet and they will just release their kind of like, this is recycling week and this is our Instagram posts and we're going to recycle 1% of our clothes that we make, for example, like fast fashion or something like that. And that's just complete bullshit. And I think people see through it. I think consumers are smart enough now and people that engage with brands to understand when a company has real intent in making things better and doing things better. A great example of this was Ace and Tate, which I think was last year or the year before. They released their We Fucked Up article where they literally listed a bunch of things which they did completely wrong in the year before and how they're going to change that. I really like to see that because it's them putting their hands up and kind of saying, we're trying to be as sustainable or as proactive and making positive change as possible, but we're just not quite there yet. And these are all the things they get wrong. And by doing that, hopefully other companies will see that and pick up on the same mistakes. So there's like an element of knowledge sharing as well in terms of making sure that when companies are doing things right, it's recorded and shared, but also when companies are doing it wrong, they share that information as well. And for us not to start cancelling brands for trying,
And I think this also shows how the approach or the understanding, even from social layers of our world, how the understanding of sustainability has changed over the years. Because to be brave enough to get out and say, these are our mistakes and we will improve upon them, it's a much better step towards a more sustainable way of living and doing things and doing business. Because, brands, it's about doing business most of the time. So how do you feel the approach of sustainability has changed over the year, for example, with your experience at Leap and the work that you've been doing with different brands or companies? Do you see any change on requests, for example, even more participation from the client themselves? Do they come with ideas of what they want to do compared to a few years ago that they might come to you looking for all the solutions? So what is the progress over the last years?
Yeah, there's been a huge changing, especially 8 years ago. There would just be companies that were kind of charities or organizations where they were like founded on making positive change that would come to us. And they would always kind of have a very strong idea of how they wanted to do that. And I think now we're working with these bigger brands that maybe were bigger ships to steer, that have now seen that their future is tied to the future of sustainability and being more thoughtful in how they operate. And what we're doing now is helping those maybe bigger organizations understand how they operate from a sustainable, positive position. And if that's a campaign that's raising awareness of a new recyclable packaging that they've done, or even kind of going into their internal culture, so helping them talk about those values with the people that work at those companies. I think it's been that big change, almost like the startup mentality only a handful of years ago to like now these much bigger organizations. I think there's part of it they probably feel almost forced into it, that the world wants everything or needs everything, not even wants everything, needs everything to be sustainable, or even going beyond sustainability and making things circular. We need that to keep humanity going, as slightly doom and gloom and sensational as that sounds. And yeah, it's just nice seeing those companies finally wake up and really come to us with intent of changing themselves, not only from a brand perspective, but from their supply chains to how they operate internally. And with that comes all the other elements, say, whereas we used to maybe do more fixed deliverables, so we build like a sustainable website, or we would design packaging that was sustainable. Now they're kind of more of the singular deliverables in a much bigger project and sustainable strategy, which we're just seeing more and more of, which is really good to see.
This is very nice, and it shows also the maturity of a lot of companies as we move forward. And I was wondering, because you mentioned companies or clients, so my question would be, do you find that clients and brands come directly to you, or do you find it sometimes that agencies push for the sustainable image, in quotation marks, for a brand, and you work more with agencies? What is the balance of work?
I would say probably 90% of our work comes directly from the clients, from our website, from word of mouth, networks of people we've met along the way. I think another great thing about having purpose at the foundation of your business is that you normally make a lot of friends quicker. It's almost like when you go to a gig and you know you're going to get along with everybody there because you're all into the same music. I think when you kind of work in the kind of purpose sector of creativity, you know, if someone's got this intent of making the world a better place, what's not to like you're almost guaranteed to get along with them. So I think we've done really well in that respect. We're also a B Corp. So that's helped immensely, kind of having that seal of approval that we don't just say we do good things, that we can actually measure it and quantify it. And we do that on a regular basis. We release impact reports. I've got one here sat next to me. And I just don't think that design studios currently do enough of that. This measuring what you say you do more than kind of just what you say. I think we're all very adept at overselling ourselves. We're used to selling shiny brands and things that look cool. But then when you get to the bit where you talk about, okay, what's our hiring policy look like? Or how much of our revenue do we give away to a charity in 3 hours this year? I think they're the real conversations that really bring in brands that want to, and companies that want to work with you for the long haul. I think with sustainability, it kind of cuts through the business environment that everybody was so used to going to these big, long, boardroom tables and talking about quarterly profit and turnover and how is this logo going to reinvent the company. But with sustainability, you're going to these meetings and you're talking to people about, okay, like what do you care about? What do you want to defend on earth with your work? How do you want to change your child's life? How do you want to make a future better for everybody? It's those really big, nice questions that get you out of the day-to-day, that break down the walls, and you start to have these real emotive conversations which only build better relationships between us and the clients.
And I think they also build or create or promote or almost ask for transparency on what you do, because it creates a work ethic that it's, it might be profit driven, but it's also purpose driven, for example. And especially on your website for the projects you have like a section at the end that this is what we did and this is how people got something better out of it, or what was the cost, or how we are helping the earth, which I think it's very, very important to measure the impact you have on projects like this, because it showcases good that can be done in a good way.
Yeah, 100%. So at Leap, we don't just measure our bottom line impacts, like you said, on our portfolio. We record the positive impact it has as well as profit. So whether that's like people helped or if it's a tree planting project, trees planted, kind of things like that. Like we truly believe that it's a balance, that there can't be real progressive change until we get out of the mindset of profit over everything. And we're not trying to say that profit has to be sacrificed for the sake of sustainability. Far from it. Sustainable projects can have huge success, and even more so than if that project was done without sustainability in mind. We kind of know from all the research that more people now are purchasing things that are sustainable on that principle. So I think it's showing that profitability is inherently linked with sustainability. And one, it's not kind of one or the other, that you're not going to sacrifice one for the sake of the other. This is showing that you can make a really good living and you can make a really successful project through being sustainable. They're not separate.
I'm just thinking now in terms of creativity and how you go through the process, for the various projects you've worked on. Did you have to tackle any projects that sustainability came as an afterthought, or during a rebrand or a process of a company going, changes? And do you find this difficult to get into the mind of what is going, and or do you have any creative limitations at all when you're going through this?
Yeah, at our studio critiques, it's always the hot topic, is that balance of making it really sustainable and planet centric, but then not having that sacrifice any sort of creativity or output. Because there is a continuous argument of, you could make a website so it's so incredibly light that it's just text on a white background, and that will have the smallest carbon footprint. But will that do the best job at persuading someone to donate to a charity, for example? So the kind of conversations we have at Leap are trying to strike that balance of, okay, this project might actually have a website that has a slightly larger carbon footprint than we would like, but we're doing that in the aim that the impact of those carbon intensive features will create a better outcome for that project.
Yeah.
There was like a second part to that question, actually, that I could answer.
It was basically, if sustainability comes as an afterthought in a project, how do you tackle this? If you are not involved from the beginning, either a project or a process, I don't know, it could be a rebrand or it could be anything else, a startup or something. And they're doing through things, and suddenly, sustainability, let's hit this mark as well.
Yeah, I think that goes back to our conversation on transparent and honesty. I think you can tell when a company is greenwashing, when you can tell they're not being quite as honest as they need to be when they're talking to you, and you can kind of tell when those sustainable aspects are an afterthought. I don't think you can like sugarcoat a non-sustainable product or practice, but what you can be is honest about it and honest about the change with it. We don't really start projects that don't have a sustainable edge, or we feel like it's an afterthought. I think we kind of want to have these truthful conversations on the impact that we have as an industry, and also the conversations that whatever the client is, the impact that they have. I mean, what we're finding is that the clients are more happy to have those conversations. I think it's a kind of growing thing with us, in the sense of when we go to talk to someone, they might not they might not have the full picture, and how they might be describing what they want. Our first thought might be, oh, they're trying to greenwash this bad thing that they do. But actually, these more in-depth conversations lead us to discover actually there is real intent behind it. They're just maybe not as educated on how to communicate their sustainability, which is absolutely fine. I think these bigger companies now, we're finding more that we're talking to like sustainability officers or those people they've hired that have that scientific edge. But quite a lot of the time you're talking to founders that just kind of had a dream and they went and made their product, or they made their company, and they found this success. And then now that they've got that, they really want to do good with it. And how they describe it or how they go about it might at surface level seem kind of flippant, but I think we're just always open to have those conversations. We always say that everybody deserves a seat at the table. So we always want that conversation first and not jump on a judgment straight away in the sense of thinking that they're trying to hide something, because I don't think it's ever the case. I think 99% of the times people do want to do good. It's just helping them understand how they can do it and how we can be part of them finding their path.
Yeah, and you mentioned quite a lot being truthful and honest, and I think this is something that we should consider. And I feel that we see that personal opinion here, but I have the feeling, for example, like a lot of brands might jump on the sustainability train just because it's in vogue, or just because it sounds cute, or just because it might generate more likes on social media. So, for example, let's say a fast fashion brand, they create a line with recycled material. It occupies a very small part of a huge store. And so this gets me wondering, what's happening with the rest of the shop there, or with all the 1,000 other products, or how was the distribution for everything, or the production, or talking about fair labor practices, for example, and all this. What for you would it truly mean to commit to this path, to be in a sustainable journey?
Take fast fashion, for example, or a large clothing company having maybe a sustainable range, but then they're not, like you're saying, they might not be paying the people that make that sustainable t-shirt fairly. I used to be quite cynical, and I used to always think that a company had to do as much as they could straight away, kind of like I said earlier, and coming to the realization that as much as I want that to happen, it's not feasible. So I think you have to take the company's small win, their attempt. You have to take it as long, like I said, there's always a caveat. You can just tell if a company is being like, oh, we're going to donate 0.5% to charity, and they've just announced they made $500 million in profit that year or something. Like, that's complete bullshit. I'm talking about an aspect of their company that is really good, and they're trying really hard to change that, but they don't necessarily roll that across the board. I think what you do is you accept the small win, you accept that this is a process, but at the same time, you don't give up on pressuring them to make change across the board. So you can kind of smile and nod and say, yep, you did real good that time, but there's still a lot more to do. And I think how you do that is just keep the pressure on, essentially. So keep on telling them they need to do more, that one thing isn't enough. I think there are those brands that will hide behind their single project, like you've said, and that's my caveat in the sense of those huge fast fashion brands that bring out a line of recycled polyester t-shirts, and then they sit back down, they're kind of like, well, that's our sustainability project for the year. And it's like, nah, like you can do so much better. You can do so much more than this. You're not doing enough, straight up. But there's this balance. And like, again, previously, I think the consumer knows. People have that guilt now when they start to buy fast fashion, because we know what's behind it. And then you can see other companies that are maybe trying to do more ingrained sustainable movements within their companies. And those are the ones that will probably be around longer. I think people are getting to the point where fast fashion had this massive uptick, but I hope the tide is turning on that, and that real sustainable options are going to be the way moving forward.
Do you feel there is like social pressure, like you mentioned? Do you feel like this is visible for brands today? Social culture, in a sense, not demands, but would prefer, to buy something that's more sustainable. Or also, you touched upon this earlier, for the companies you work with. Do you think the pressure for change in vision comes from the bottom up of the company, or, a founder or the CEO suddenly decides, let's do this? What is the balance there? I would personally feel that it comes from bottom up, but I'm not sure you have much more experience.
Yeah, I think I'd probably say for those bigger companies, it's probably bottom up. Of companies where we see from every angle, at every position, there's someone that's pushing sustainability. So I don't think it's kind of a one size fits all rule. But I think for those larger companies where they have more shareholders that they need to keep the profit going to, it's a lot harder for those people in the higher up positions to say, oh, do you know what? We might take a slight cut on profit this year, but we're going to like help all these people, or we're going to like increase our minimum wage to a living wage. I think that's definitely coming from the bottom up.
So often sustainability is translated to many people's mind that this equals environmental actions, for example, and that's it. So let's plant a tree, this is sustainable. But we should also take into consideration social issues and social sustainability. For example, how we could build the processes or plan better for future generations, so they have a healthier future and they become engaged communities, and how we also today promote well-being or fair labor, like we touched upon earlier, or fair living conditions, health, safety, human rights, diversity, equity, accessibility, so on. So all of these touches under a larger umbrella of social sustainability. So what sustainability is for you? How do you approach it in projects? Is this different per each project? What aspects of all this that I've just described you try to add in the recipe to have a successful project?
Yeah, sustainability is, you're right in saying it's so broad, and right again in saying that I think when you say it, people normally jump to trees and animals, conservation and growing and bits and carbon footprints. But yeah, the conversation is so much wider than that. I mean, we work with clients that we do diversity projects. One of my favorite ones at the moment, we've recently been working with Bernardo's, so we're helping them explore how we better prepare care leavers with life skills. So they were finding that when a care leaver gets to the age of 18 and they leave care, they might not have all of the life skills that me and you have. So they might not know how to cook a lot of meals. They might not know how to use a washing machine, the kind of simple things that we take for granted. So what we've helped them to do is design a hub, essentially, that's going to hold media, that's going to be a place for these care experienced young people before they leave to go on and learn these life skills. And on the surface, that doesn't necessarily sound sustainable, but for us, helping people live better lives is just as intrinsic to sustainability as planting more trees or helping some conservation project. The diversity in work and sustainability is huge. I mean, even the word sustainable itself, like we have conversations on, are we trying to just sustain the trajectory that we're going in, or are we trying to improve it? Like, is sustainable even the right word anymore? Should we be talking about making things better, not just sustaining it and keep it the same? So yeah, it's crazy broad. We've done projects with diversity in schools, so making sure there's more diversity from a kind of racial perspective in school boards. So with the Black Lives Matter movement, I think what that kind of really showed everybody is, I think there was like a complacency in that area of society, essentially. And what we really need to do is start to really use that momentum to make substantial change, that we try and make projects that aren't just around kind of the 3 months that campaign runs and then it disappears. Like what we're really interested in is like, how do we change policy? How do we get stuff in law? And we love those clients that have that mindset as well, that we talk to and they're like, we really want to make this project and we can see that it's going to change this demographic in this way. But what we really want in the big aspirational goal of this is to change how society operates, like I said at the start. And I think for design studios, talking like that is really strange and a little bit weird, and it doesn't quite sit quite right. I think all this time design has been seen as a tool for business to kind of sell more, that we're more of a reflection of culture. I remember reading that on quite a famous designer's Instagram recently. So she was saying that designers are kind of a reflection of society, and now that sustainability is on the table, we should be reflecting that. And as much as I see her point, I completely disagree. I think designers have the opportunity to not be reflective of society and culture, but to define it. We are the gatekeepers for business. We're the conduit between someone wanting something done in that world and then it going to the general public. And just having that opportunity, even if it doesn't necessarily have the outcome that we want, if every designer had some sort of positive impact conversation when they receive the brief, whether that trickles down or not, eventually something's going to sink in and there's going to be change that happens. And I think it's getting designers used to having power and to really understanding the responsibility that we have in helping make the world a better place.
I agree, and it's very important because I do believe we have responsibility, and it might not as much in type design, but very often in conversations with agencies, for example, accessibility comes into the equation of a project. Like, for example, how a typeface would be accessible either for people with reading issues or visual impairments. Where is this typeface going to be used for? What's the final objective? So I do believe that designers and agencies have a role to play, and I think if more and more people brought sustainability into the discussions from the beginning, when different brands might go into a rebrand or they are forming up, that the agencies could be very, very effective in pushing brands towards a better vision, for example. So talking about how brands can affect people's decisions, where should one start from? For example, what parameters do you usually add in the beginning when you first meet with a client? What are some things that you want to understand, and what are some things that you always propose?
I guess it's understanding the values of the company. So the largest scale aspirations that they have, I think when you first meet with a client, I think this goes just generally beyond sustainability, they always have the end result in mind. So they might come to you and say, we need to increase revenue. So we want a new website that streamlines our user journey. And that's absolutely fine. But I think what you need to do is have those conversations in terms of, okay, let's take a step back and like, what do you want to achieve as a business? So we know you want an increase in sales, but that doesn't necessarily mean that has to come through the way that you foresee it. If there's a sustainable option that we can like weave in with that. So by default, us as a business would look at how we do that. If it was a website that we're creating, how we would do that sustainable in terms of very literally making a low carbon footprint website. But then there's also the conversation of, okay, like what are the products you sell? Is there maybe we can have a conversation about supply chains, and that can then be weaved into the marketing of the business. So you might find that actually that product that they want to sell more of, it has this really cool sustainable angle, and that all of a sudden becomes a campaign that increases their revenue based around and celebrating the sustainability of their products rather than just jumping to the very visceral end results. So I guess my advice would always be to take that step back. And if you want to have conversations with clients around sustainability, start with the emotive side of the conversation and don't be afraid to talk in a more personal way. Like I said previously, I think sustainability does a really good job of cutting through the kind of the business jargon, because you are, as kind of sensational as it sounds, talking about trying to stop climate change and solving these huge problems. And I think when people talk about them, they feel very large and hard to grasp, but it can be simple things. Like sometimes like people go to these business meetings and they talk about revenue and selling more stuff, but everybody on their phone in their pocket has pictures of the sunset or their children or stuff that they care about. And I think reminding them of you can do business, and you can do business to protect the things that you love, is where you need to start. And then you can get down to the nitty-gritty of, in terms of deliverables, how are we going to deliver it? How are we going to make it sustainable? But making sure and understanding kind of why they want to be sustainable in the first place is paramount.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what you say is extremely important, that one part, it's a nice journey to have things from the beginning, to be well thought out and to be able to also, make some good. But also at the end, I think it's very important that we shouldn't feel guilty for feeling good, for doing some good. So, it should be a nice feeling of we have achieved something. And this can be also like distributed with the entire company. So there is something that's, uniting people for better.
Yeah, and I think there shouldn't be guilt for occasionally doing something bad. Like I think there's a guilt that sometimes people have, especially when you get into doing a lot of sustainable things, that you start to feel guilty for taking a flight to go on holiday, and you kind of start to overanalyze yourself in terms of how can I have zero impact on the world? And I think it can make life miserable. I think there's ways to have really beneficial impact on the world, but do it at a pace that allows you to live and that it doesn't come with sacrifice. Like, we have to make sure we enjoy what we do and not view sustainability as always as a reduction of things. So a reduction of joy and happiness and restrictions. It's a change and a kind of exploration and curiosity of what other ways we can do things, not we need to choose this more boring or more restrictive way of it. It's just reframing what we're trying to do together.
I agree. It's not a harder path to walk on. It's just a different one. This is what I feel. And this is what should translate into people's mind that, if there is purpose and willingness, it will be okay. Solution will be found. So just to wrap things up, is there anything you would say to people listening to us? Do you have any tips on how brands can improve towards more sustainable way of doing things? I mean, I have like a small checklist here, but it might sound like very boring. But what about sustainable web hosting, for example, or any environmental actions people can do, like even tree planting? I know it sounds cliche, but it might help. Or using paper for your printing, or you could also use a renewable energy provider for your offices, and you can reduce travel. I mean, COVID had helped a lot with reducing our carbon footprint on traveling. But what other tips you have, or how should conversations start in companies? What would you evoke people to do?
I think first of all, for creatives, I know probably there's some people listening that are like, this guy sounds so wanky talking about designers changing the world and having this like all this impact. But I think that's where it starts, is the kind of realization that everything we do has an impact. Like you're saying, that there are these very literal things that you can do, reducing travel, renewable energy for providers. But I think for creatives, it's getting into that mindset of we have the power to have these conversations and to really change how a project moves and goes, and trying to find the most sustainable way of delivering it, and even providing more sustainable options. That we're here to provoke change as much as design for brands and make cool packaging. That's all great. But I think when you're old and you're kind of looking back on your life, I think those kind of really fundamental projects that you'll think about are the ones where you had an impact on people and planet, rather than just kind of shifting more nice things. And then I think from a brand perspective, it's having the kind of courage to be bold and brave first and foremost, and start that sustainable journey. Like, I would love more than anything for anybody listening to this from a company perspective that just doesn't quite know how their brand can fit in with being more sustainable and being more proactive and having more positive impact. I think just reaching out to companies that make impact with a triple bottom line in mind, and starting that journey, no matter how small, if there's real intent there's the kind of the potential to really make some big change. That it can be the small things like you're saying, so kind of using recycled paper, tree planting, kind of giving money to charity. They're all kind of really, really nice small steps, and there's the bigger things that you can talk about and discover as well on the way.
Yeah, and I think taking small steps also creates a norm in a sense. So, if something today looks odd, but we do it, suddenly a year later, it will not look odd. It will be, the way of doing things. So step by step, the way of doing things will change and will become much better. Theoretically, this is a wish, I assume.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, that first step is the most important. Once you're on the journey, it feels natural, and you start to get the kind of satisfaction from it as well, that not only your business will operate it as it always has been, but then you've also got the additional benefit of not having that feeling that you're not doing enough, or you're not trying to help or better the way that you're doing something. That first baby step is all you need to start on your kind of sustainable communications journey.
This is amazing. Thank you so much, Nathan. It has been a pleasure talking with you today, and I hope everybody listening has enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thanks, Emilios. It's been great. Hope everyone's got something to take away and they can go have the nice big questions and discussions about how to save the world.
Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about Nathan's work with Leap, visit their website at leap.eco, E-C-O. Also, look for a link to our blog post in the show notes of this episode, and check out monotype.com/podcast to read about all of our prior guests. If you've been enjoying our podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify to rate and review this episode. If you really like us, subscribe to the show and share us with your friends. Creative Characters is a production of Monotype, Christopher Sound, and Marie Tabarez. We'll be back soon with more episodes. Take care, everybody.